Hey now, welcome back to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. It is our second episode, and as always, I'm Brian Saperstein, and along with me is Rob Vale. What's going on, Rob?
Well, I'm just getting over the shock of actually, it looks like people listened to episode one, and it's fantastic. It was a crazy week last week. We didn't even think we were going to publish that as an episode, if you remember. We were just getting together to see what happened when we went back and forth. Did we talk over each other? And then we both didn't hate it, so we published it.
Oh, did we publish it? I think we put it on YouTube for some unknown reason as well.
And then 3 days later, we're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. I'm looking at the stats each day, and it seemed to have gone beyond friends and family. I think we topped out when I checked just before we started recording at 68 downloads, which kind of blew my mind. I don't know 68 people, so unless you've got lots of friends, Brian.
I have some friends, but usually uses up most of my salary paying them to remain so.
Well, one of them, I think, that was listening, hopefully was my brother, because he supplied the guitar solo for the intro. So big shout out to my brother Chris there, because that was awesome. I think I WhatsApped him on a Sunday afternoon and said, I need something that sounds a little bit like an F1 car, so we can have an F1 car go past and then lead into some kind of screechy guitar and then back into an F1 car again. And on those garbled instructions, he's gone and done a solid there, and very happy with how that turned out. So thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. That's fantastic. What people start a podcast and have theme music for the first episode? I mean, that's just wild.
It's awesome. And I think, we've been busy since. We've gone out and we've grabbed everything we can in terms of social media and domain names, just in case this thing lasts beyond episode 2. So we're ready to rock on that one.
Yeah, I think one thing I heard that was awesome during the time we launched was from a lot of my friends who are both a few long-term passionate friends, fans of Formula One, friends do, but also a lot of newbies who said, at one point they said, I think you made up half the names of those drivers. And what they heard, though, was our excitement and sort of the couple guys who live in the States, been watching Formula One on and off for a very long time, you more than me. But what they heard also is, we explained things. So I joked, people called after the finish to the last race. And I think we can really do something here where both for the long-term passionate fans who get it and who have been part of it, but also the new members to the fold, not just our friends and family, but people across the world who want to get into Formula One. Great place to start. We're not overly technical. We're just a couple guys who want to have a laugh, and we're happy you're here with us. And we'd love to have you join us for this journey. So I would just say thanks to everybody who has listened. And by the way, my dad even figured out how to access a podcast for the first time in his life, and he said we sucked. So thanks, Dad.
Well, I got the classic British response, which was just to rip into me for calling football soccer and various other Americanisms. I was like, well, I consider myself bilingual now that I speak both English and American, so I think I'm doing pretty well.
I think you are too. I think you are too, for sure. So what are we going to be doing today?
So today we're going to have two main pieces. We are going to do a season review. We could take a walk down memory lane and look at how it all began back in Bahrain all the way through to the end. I think we're going to miss out the last Grand Prix because we kind of did that to death last week. And we're also going to, no offense, Max and Lewis, if you're listening, but we're not really going to focus on them too much because, again, they took all the limelight talking about the championship. So kind of just looking at our favorite pieces. There's about 20 odd races to cover. So we're going to break them down into 4 quarters, being as, that'll tailor to the American audience. They love a good sport broken into quarters. So we'll go through races 1 to 5, share notes, pull out the highlights, and move on. And then after that, we've got our, as is tradition at this time of year, end of year awards that we are going to give out. And obviously this year, nobody will know what they are, but I'm kind of hoping that next year it's going to be the prestigious awards that, all the F1 drivers are going to be looking at on Twitter to see where the awards went.
So I'm so excited to jump in. And before I have you start us on the races, I just got to say one thing. Rob and I laid out the agenda for this podcast, but we didn't share what we want to talk about, meaning what races we want to highlight. And we certainly didn't talk about the award winners. We're going to talk about the driver year in review from top three, bottom three. And so, to the point of us having a discussion, it wouldn't be a discussion in 2021 going into 2022 if we didn't ask you all to participate. And Rob, I know you mentioned the social channels. The easiest way is obviously on Twitter. The fastest way. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, but on Twitter, it's at F1 Dirty Side. Send us a note, send us a comment, subscribe to the feed, and participate. We will be on there every so often. We do have jobs that we need to keep. So this is just for giggles, but we'll be on checking it out, as well as I said, Insta and Facebook. So let us know for sure. And I just wanted to make sure to engage you all. We're going to be, like I said, next year with fantasy, the continued engagement on Twitter and social, and we're going to be awarding winners and events. It's going to be great. Just keep plugged in. Sorry, I had to give that little plug for the Twitter.
No apologies needed. You're going to be keeping an eye on that one anyway. I'm going to be hitting all guns on the Instagram. I spend far too much time looking at all those kind of F1 memes out there and thinking I got to start posting some of these as well. But anyway, onto our season review. So we're going to break it down. First, we're going to go back to the first 5 races, which I have down as Bahrain, Imola, Portugal, Spain, and Monaco. So it was quite good fun, actually, going back and kind of digging up facts about what happened in each race, because you like to think that you remember the season. You really don't. You go back and you start researching. You're like, oh, yeah, that happened. The notes I really took from Bahrain and Imola, my first 2 were, as I'm going to call him, Mazepin. Because
that is his name. There's a website about it too.
Yeah, I mean, the poor guy just spent more time going around in circles than actually going around the track. And that was kind of like 2 of the big things I took away from Bahrain and Imola. Apart from Imola was also, we had the Bottas and Russell high-speed crash, which that was nasty. I mean, you were right. You're driving in the rain and you catch a shiny curb, and sometimes you can kind of feel the car kind of do a slight twitch, but nothing like that doing 180 miles an hour. I think Bottas moved over slightly, moved Russell over to the outside. The wheels touched the curbs, and boom, those 2. I was surprised there wasn't some kind of an injury a lot more severe in that one.
I had only 2 notes from this quarter of races, and one of them was Imola, and it was the George and Valtteri crash. It was nasty. It was actually what you don't want to see. The speed they were going and the way they came together. It was bad. And you know what was fascinating to me is it was at the time as well, if you remember all the rumors about Russell to Mercedes, especially given the way he ended his Bahrain run in 2020. Everyone said, well, maybe he'll be replacing Valtteri. And for them to come together and rack up a huge Mercedes bill and a Williams bill. But then for George, he kind of came a little bit unglued. And again, dude, I mean, I get in an accident at 40 miles an hour and I'm freaking out. So I can't imagine 180. But he really took it to Valtteri, and Valtteri was kind of like, what's going on? I don't really understand, And so agreed, it was chaos. It was not what I wanted to see. But for me, that Imola crash was just fascinating to watch 2 drivers kind of raw emotions coming out of that. And I'm happy they're both fine, but that was a costly crash.
Yeah, but then on the plus side from Imola, we got Norris on the podium as well, which was nice to see as well. Then as I kind of started going through and looking at highlights, all I've got written down for Portugal and Spain were non-events. Not a lot happened, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried that is this going to be the great season that we want it to be? They were kind of very straightforward races, so I was like, okay, I went and tried to find a few clips, and not even F1 has got many clips of what happened in those races either. So poor old Portugal and Spain. And then we came to Monaco, and I was just gutted for Leclerc.
Oh my God.
Because to get pole, which everyone knows at Monaco, the street circuit, if you get pole there and you get a good start, you're well on the way to having a great, unless you kiss a wall too hard, you're well on your way. So to not even start the race after getting pole was just felt very sorry for him.
And about 3 years ago, I learned the name. Charles Leclerc is from there. He's from Monaco, and the name of a person from Monaco is you're a Monegasque. For all of our listeners who did not know that, which would have been me 3 years ago. But so yeah, when he was on pole and then came around and just clipped the wall, oh god, it made me sick. And then he couldn't start because it hit the gearbox, and it was just a big old mess. My Monaco note, just to jump in really fast, was I love the podium, Verstappen, Sainz, and Norris. I love the that three we thought was interesting, especially just Lando and Carlos, who are friends, both up there, and they were goofing around in the interview. I thought it was great. I thought it was an incredibly boring race. As you said, if you can start first, often that's a good sign. It's a procession. And I learned one thing, that Monaco has its own TV direction for the race. And the reason I learned this is in what was quite honestly a boring race, there was one overtake that mattered. Someone, I don't know, it was Lewis and Seb and somebody else are coming out of the pits, and it was all right there towards turn one, and it was all exciting. And they cut away to a Lance Stroll like clip, and they showed Lance before they went to the scene, and like that became a meme in and of itself. Like they would show like the rocket launch to go to the moon, and then Lance Stroll, and like it was like the Lance Stroll cut in became a deal. So if anyone's bored, take about 30 seconds and Google Monaco Lance Stroll. But it was horrible TV direction at that moment. Crofty was actually asking the directors, could we please go back and show and they didn't. And they just kept showing Lance Stroll a segue. But so, yeah, agreed. I really thought Charles had something going there, and I was cheering for him in his home race. I watched all the Ferrari clips of him and Carlos and just Charles by himself showing people around. Oh, I get my hair cut here. My mom works there, kind of thing. It was awesome. But yeah, heartbreaker.
Yeah, I honestly thought they'd get it fixed and he'd be able to start. But I think when you've done that much damage, not able to salvage that one. So, okay. So, yeah, I think that puts a bow around the first quarter. I'll let you take the lead on this, but this is our strange quarter because there's technically 6 races in here, but I'll explain myself. So we've got Baku in Azerbaijan, France, Austria, the British Grand Prix, and Hungary. Austria's in there twice because it was just Groundhog Day. They just did it twice. So this quarter is going to have the Austrian featuring twice. So I'll let you take the lead on this quarter, Brian.
I only had 2 things I wanted to highlight here in this quarter, and one of them is a very important one that I actually would encourage people to go watch if you haven't and if you're interested. So first was Baku at Azerbaijan. So beautiful, just amazing street circuit, but high speed. Put it on my bucket list. I'd love to do Monaco for the glitz and the glamour. I'd like to do Baku to get one of those like balconies that are on the back half of the course that are right on top of the track, and half of them are empty. I don't know how to get an Airbnb in Baku, but we got to do it and get one of those balconies. It'd be brilliant. Anyway, Pirelli had a bad day, and I am a Pirelli customer, so I'm allowed to say this. I have Pirelli winter tires on my car, Soto Zeros. And so if those blow out, I'm be really pissed. But what happened in Baku was, Lance came around the corner first towards the end of the race, came around towards the straight, right? And his rear wheel let go. And you could hear it in his voice. And Rob, I know we've talked about this back in the day, but it was the first time I ever heard a driver call for a red flag. And I didn't understand it at first. And what he meant was, I'm actually in danger. Like I'm in the way of a high speed straight and I'm sideways in the middle of the track. And I didn't get it even then. I got it after the fact. It was nasty. And the Pirellis were just cutting loose. And then Max had the race won, going 205, 10 miles an hour right next to the pit entrance down the straight. And his tires, left rear, just let go. And it's a famous picture of him kicking it. But that was a nasty crash. And that was fast. And had it gone left, he would have run into that barrier by the pit lane. And so I was happy he was okay. But as a unapologetic Lewis fan, I thought Lewis now had it sealed. And so they go to restart the race. And Lewis made a humongous mistake. He left, and this is I'm going to get a little inside baseball, but I'm going to explain it for the casuals. He left what's called brake magic, according to Mercedes. He left it on. And what that does is it toggles the brake focus. And I'm probably screwing this up, but I'm doing my best. So it toggles the focus, and in this case, to the front. And he'd had it on to warm up his front brakes. And then he thought he turned it off. And trust me, I've listened to the team radio many times. And so then what happened is, as they started, He cut inside of Checo and he had the line, but he bumped his brake magic back to on. And so he went to stop. And what happened is all of the braking went to the front wheels, and he basically locked up and had no control and went straight off into the runoff. And as he went into the runoff, the whole pack passed him before he could get back on. So Lewis went from winning Baku with 2 or 3 or 4 laps left to losing it because he bumped a button. And huge mistake. He'd been on the team radio. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And then he sprinted right down the runoff and lost all those points, which could have been a championship decider. It actually made me a little happy because I think Max got hosed with the way his tire let go. So it was kind of a, both got damaged there. But anyway, so Baku would be my first. My last is Hungary, but I'll hold that because that's the last one of the group. So Rob, what else do you have from anything before Hungary?
Well, just to go back on that a little bit in Baku, a couple of things we've learned there is that you're a nerd that likes to re-listen to team radio over and over again. So
all the time.
Nice.
It's fantastic. You know what I'm doing at about 1 a.m, team radio.
But yeah, the other thing about Baku though, because of all that, all the tires are let go, and Lewis and Max, I think gave us a podium of Gasly, Perez, and Vettel, which was awesome. Really nice to see, because we'll come to driver awards later. I don't want to give anything away there, but it was nice to see a different podium. And same as you, I didn't really have any comments on, well, France apparently, and this is only because I Googled it when I was looking for facts on this, was I think the only race of the year that had no retirements. There you go, for you little stats fans. That's a little pub quiz question in the future. Austria was just...
Circuit Austria Paul was Ricard.
Austria was just rubbish twice. I mean, not much happened. And the bizarre thing is, I used to love driving that circuit on the F1 games. I really like the Austrian track, but they were nothing. I know you said you're going to skip straight to Hungary, so I'm not quite sure how you can skip over Silverstone because we had Hamilton and Max out again there. We had the Max out from the coming together with Hamilton. Quite a big deal in the whole season there. So I'm a little bit surprised you skipped over Britain.
Well, I mean,
anti-British again.
Always. If there's no Hamilton and Verstappen conversation, I'll save it for the funniest moment, that race, for a different reason. But I honestly, after that, Christian Horner is so upset running around. You don't put a foot wrong at Cop's Corner. And by the way, can I give my wife a shout out? My wife, sorry, Christian Horner, plug your ears. She calls him Spice Boy, being married to a Spice Girl. And he's so uptight about stuff. She goes, oh, there's Spice Boy running around again. So Spice Boy was so angry after Silverstone. It was just crazy to me. It was non-team principle-ish in my mind, but I really didn't have much to say about it. So you're welcome to hit on it as much as you like, my fellow F1 fan.
And then, Hungary. Well, this is your section, so I'll let you take Hungary first, because I think I know what you're about to talk about. So I'll let you go first. So many parts.
And I'm going to do 2 things here with Hungary. One, for all of the casual fans, please go rewatch Hungary 2021. It is the last race before summer break. It was just fantastic. Number 2 is it proved out a theory that I have for too many races, that track position doesn't mean anything. And what I mean by that is this. So the race starts. It had been raining. Valtteri Bottas decides to become a bowling ball, and he runs right into the back of Lando. And then beautifully, he and Lando take out both Red Bulls effectively. Max was able to soldier on with a very broken car. And so what they had to do, and this is probably one of my favorite things of the year, was they had to go back around on the formation lap and get back to start. And Lewis is in first, has track position. He goes by the pits because you don't give up first place. You just don't hand it away. Every other car who was still running went into the pits to get off their inters, which are the wet tires. For new fans, it's kind of like the medium wet tires, not the heavy wets, not the blue stripes. And so they all went into regular race tires, whether it was softs or mediums or hards. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. I've never seen this before. No one had either. Lewis is the only car lining up to take the start. The lights go out and he is alone. Well, actually, the medical car was behind him a ways, but it was just nuts. I've never seen anything like that. And so this is the first, and I'm going to highlight three. This was the first race where being in front was a humongous disadvantage. So Lewis then had to pit on the second lap of the restart to get off the inters. And now he is behind everybody because they got a free stop during the formation lap. And he then had to come through to catch Esteban Ocon from Alpine, who was leading. And Fernando Alonso, in the defending clinic of the year, please, if you're new, just go watch this. Take an hour and a half, watch Hungary. It is epic for all of the reasons I highlighted. Fernando Alonso, just amazing defending for his teammate. Cost Lewis some spots, probably the win. Also probably cost Lewis a championship shot. We've already talked about this a couple of times, but I'm done with Hungary. It was epic.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo that. I was just sitting there watching Lewis on his own and the five lights. And actually, as Lewis came around and a few of them dived in, I was like, okay, this would be interesting. Which ones have gambled, which ones haven't? And then it was, oh, okay, they've all decided to go in. And you just had Lewis there. And I was thinking, well, it doesn't really matter if he makes a bad start or not, because he's definitely going to be leading into the first corner. But no, you're right. And then he's at the back and he does what Lewis always does and comes charging through the field. And as he got up towards Alonso, I just thought he was going to have him on toast. He was just going to absolutely gobble him up. And there's a phrase they always use about how wide has Alonso made that car, because it was 3 times the width. And like you say, it's mismatch of performance. But if you know where to put the car and you've got the racecraft like Alonso does, it was spectacular, because I thought, okay, he's going to get past him in a lap or two. And I don't even remember. I'd have to go back and look it up. But he held him back a lot. And I mean, gave Ocon the win.
It did. He really did. I've never seen anything where he knew he wasn't racing Lewis. He was racing to defend Lewis. And he did an amazing, it was not dirty in the least. And it was just, like you said, his car was as wide as the track. It was just epic. And the whole race was between the start with Valtteri and even Lance Stroll went rolling into Charles Leclerc at 100 miles an hour in the first corner. I mean, dude, try using the brakes. And it was epic. So to me, I went into the summer break on a high, just buzzing from Hungary, thinking this is one of the best seasons I've ever watched so far. And it just got better in the second half.
Well, it did, but we'll touch on this. It kind of went from the sublime to the ridiculous, given that we then, with the next quarter that we're going to deal with, we go to Belgium, the Netherlands, Monza, Russia, and Turkey. So Belgium. It wasn't a race. It wasn't a race. I listened to exactly what Alonso said. If there's no ability for anybody to change places, if there's been no racing laps whatsoever, then it's not a race. So if you didn't go racing, how do you give any points, let alone half points? So for anybody that's not aware, the Belgian Grand Prix is usually one of my favorites because you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be wet. And I was joking with Brian over the course of the season of one of my little crazy ideas to spice up some of these Grand Prix that never seem to have any excitement is just to fit a sprinkler system so that they can randomly turn them on. Even the drivers, nobody will know when it's going to come on, but every now and again, a sprinkler system can just kick in and just make the track wet because I don't want to see anybody crash and get hurt, but some of the best drives I've ever seen are, I remember Jenson Button in the rain. Hamilton was always great in the rain. Schumacher was great in the rain. It was just some of these guys that can just sense when their tires are on the edge of grip. And it's fantastic. So as it started raining in Belgium, I was like, oh, great. We're going to have a wet race. And we did. But we had Noah's Ark level of water. Yeah,
it was a monsoon. It wasn't a drizzle or a rain. It was horrible.
And they went round a few times. They tried to clear the water, and I can't remember how many times we had a 2.5 hour delay, I think, where they were just hoping this storm was going to go over and they'd get some racing done, and they didn't do anything. And they did, I think, 3 laps behind the safety car?
Yeah,
was it
2 even, maybe? Yeah.
And then constituted that's enough for a race. And that was one of many decisions that they've made this year that didn't sit right.
I totally agree. I actually listed that in my notes as the first FIA debacle. That was just a mess. And the only reason, the redeeming qualities for me are, I love Spa. It is the longest circuit on the track. It is technical, high speed, and difficult all at the same time, but it's so fun to watch the elevation changes. And like you said, the weather can be different. I loved that George got serious points and was in a serious place. I would say the qualifying for me was exciting because Lando was giving it the beans. And when he crashed in the wet, you could see it coming. And Sebastian Vettel, and I know we're not at the end of the year race driver recap, but let me just say this about Seb. I really, because of Netflix and all the social, I didn't like the way his career ended at Ferrari. It just felt, I don't know, not good. But when he was behind Lando and he's telling his team radio, it's too wet, it's dangerous, we need to do something about this. This is unacceptable. And then Lando crashes, and it was a big crash. Seb didn't just go whizzing by. He actually pulled over and made sure Lando was okay. He pulled over and actually saw he was moving around in there. And then he radioed back, I see him moving around. He's okay. And to me, in a monsoon, when you're just trying to get back, to pull over and check on someone else like that was Senna-esque. And I loved it, and was just tremendous. But the race, calling it a race, was a farce. And when they interviewed Lewis and he said, we need to give these people their money back, he was 100% right. That was a disaster. It was the first FIA debacle of the year for me. And there are, of course, many.
And then we rolled into the Netherlands, where not really that much happened in that race, other than it was nice to see Max win in his home Grand Prix. Sea of orange, the flares everywhere, great fans, the noise they make every time he comes down the straight. But, you know, you can only get excited about hearing the noise of the fans every lap for so long. So, yeah, I didn't really have too many from there. But then Monza. Monza. I was so happy for a McLaren 1-2.
So cool.
It was amazing. It was, I've always wanted it. Let's take a step back a second. It was great to see Red Bull bring it back to the party this year and take the fight to Mercedes. But beyond that, you got the impression it was just going to be those two. So I'd love to see, and we'll have a podcast dedicated to the new cars and the new regs next season. But I'd love for next season to go into each race with a chance of 4 or 5 teams being able to be maybe putting somebody on top of the podium. So to have that happen and not just have McLaren pinch a win, but to get a 1-2, it was like, yes, it can still be done. I know there were mitigating circumstances, but it was awesome.
Agreed. And I know, as you said, Max and Lewis took each other out at the first chicane, and not the first lap, but they took each other out as Lewis came out of the pits. But you mentioned it, a 1-2 from McLaren. You know, that was the only 1-2 by a constructor for the whole year. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy to me that Mercedes couldn't put Lewis and Valtteri up top, or even Red Bull with Max and Checo. So the only one the whole season was Danny Rick and Lando and Zach Brown up there doing shoeies. It was great.
I was convinced they were wrong when I heard that. I can't remember where it was that I heard them read out that stat that was the only 1-2. And I was like, I think you'll find you're wrong. And I'm going through the record books of the season. No, because there's a Mercedes have to have had a 1-2. I'm going through and I'm getting all the way down to the final Grand Prix. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, they knew what they were talking about. I was about to write a very strongly worded letter to Sky Sports, but yeah, apparently.
Typical British. Let me write a strongly worded letter. I'll put it in the post. No, I agree with your point. It was so cool there, 1-2, and Monza for me, that was the takeaway I had there.
Yeah, and then we rolled into Russia, and again, I don't want to give away any particular awards coming up later, but that was going to be Norris's first win. It
was his first win until the rain showed up 7 laps to go. It was his first win.
That was just tough because it was brave or stupid or a mixture of both on his part, where he just felt he could do it. Just felt it wasn't bad enough that, and it was. But
you know what it was, right? It's my little theme here. It doesn't always pay to be first. So he was afraid to pit for inters because he didn't want Lewis to pass him and then the rain not be hard enough. And he gave away his first win. So he stayed out. And Lewis, who, again, team radio nerd, he said no to the first time they said box. He said no. And he went around and they actually showed the Mercedes mechanics out there waiting for a car they can then see whizzing past as he came around the corner. And they told him, a little more forcefully. It's going to rain more. You need to get onto inters. Everyone else is moving to inters, Max and Danny Rick and everybody else behind you. And so Lewis said, all right. And he came in at the last second and put on the inters. And then it started really raining across the whole track, but especially where it started first. And my heart broke for Lando. Like the team is telling him it might rain more, but they didn't want to force him into the pits. And he said, I'm staying out. And then the second Lewis came out on the inters, the rain got harder. And Lando couldn't even make it around one time without going off at every corner. And he's like, I got a box. What, he finished 7th? I think.
Yeah.
Oh God, it just ripped my heart out. That was like, for a race that is typically boring and processional, that thing was epic. And I rewatched the last 8 laps or 9 laps, probably 5 times. And I'd like to thank YouTube TV for finally figuring out their Disney situation so they could put it back on my DVR, because I didn't have it for a couple of days and I was going through withdrawal. So anyway, we fixed that. But so I would agree with you, Sachi. For me, it was a gut punch for Lando. Just really doesn't always, as I said, doesn't always pay to be first.
And also, as I'll say, I'm just going back to my sprinkler system idea. Wet weather makes the races more exciting. So, although again, I was distraught with the way the wet weather made it more exciting because, Norris, I just wanted him to win it so bad. But I'm sure that, it's not going to be too long. And the last one of this quarter was Turkey, which I didn't have anything other than Bottas finally won. That's all I wrote on that one, which, and I was thinking, did it really take that long? And then going back, actually pairing it up with the fact from a minute ago that there were no 1-2s. I mean, I like Bottas. I think we said it last week. He just seems like a real nice, genuine guy. And I watched the video this week of his farewell at Mercedes, and it's like, oh, you seem like such a genuine, nice guy. And I loved watching him before he came to Mercedes, and he was that guy that was like kind of in a lesser car, but sticking it to people and always seemed to perform well. I had such high hopes for him. It just never really seemed to. Well, I'm sure the stats will say he's been amazing, and he's had a load of podiums, he's had wins, but it just didn't feel like we saw the very best of Bottas in that car, unless it is just he's the number 2 driver and that was his lot in life. But I don't know.
I mean, there's some part of me that worries about the number 2 at a team like Mercedes or Red Bull. And the reason I say that is how many number 2s has Red Bull gone through? And it's always the same thing. The car is set up for Max. It's set up for his driving style. It's set up, the way he wants it. And they set up both cars that way. And it's hard to be outside the limelight of, when Spice Boy gives them all the attention. So I wonder about Mercedes and quite honestly, what George is walking into. And I know George was loud the way the championship finished in support of Lewis. He has to be, it's his teammate next year. But I just am curious, because when Valtteri can't make it through the midfield, when he has something go wrong and he starts from the back, they always say the Mercedes is not made to cut through traffic. It's made to be out ahead. Well, whenever Lewis is in the back, he laps people like it's going out of style. He passes everyone. He gets back to the front. So I'm curious for people like Lewis and Max, who are supremely talented and have amazing personalities. What is it like to be the second? And I don't just mean driving. And so I'm curious to see what George does, because I believe in George. I just am curious what number 2 at Mercedes will bring him. So I guess we'll find out.
It was when Lewis and Alonso were teammates, right? And Lewis was the new guy on the scene.
Back at McLaren?
Back at McLaren, right? Yeah. And it was almost like a change in the guard moment eventually, looking back on it, where Lewis is the one that came through and has gone on to be the driver that he is. And you kind of think, well, I wonder if George is almost going to look at it like that, which is, okay, I'm over number 2, but again, last week, I respect your opinion to say Lewis might retire, but you're wrong. He'll be back, just saying. And but he won't be back forever, right? So George has got to do in there, do his time, be a good solid number 2. Oh, that sounds wrong. And
we've been canceled on Apple and Spotify.
Yeah, let's move on to last quarter. So
the last quarter, hit the races we're going to hit, because I only have
USA, Mexico, 2. Brazil, Qatar, and Saudi.
Yeah. All right. So for me, a couple notes real fast. Mexico, I have no notes on the US. other than Rob and I are trying to get there this coming year in October to do some interviews, meet some fans. Got to kind of raise some funds first. So we'll see if we can make it happen, but that'd be a lot of fun because that's in October in Austin. I didn't have any notes. I'd give one to Mexico and then I'll pause so you can give to both. Mexico was amazing to me because Yuki Tsunoda in the sister team messed up his qualifying. He got lost towards the stadium section just in front of it. And it caused Checo to also run off to avoid Yuki. And then Max showed up and his teammate and his sister team's teammate are both having a faff in the corner. And he has to pull out of what would have been an amazing lap. And Dr. Helmut Marko, I should say, went nuts on Tsunoda and just ripped him a new one. And to me, you got to kind of understand that it's the sister team and it's the junior rookie. And you should be building his confidence up. And I know Max, throw out everything for Max, and we want him to win. He didn't do it on purpose. And so that was what I took from Mexico, that and the amazing finish in the stadium. I love it. Checo's dad, and just watching them celebrate, that was fun for me. But that was really all I had for US and Mexico before I get to Brazil, which I have a whole section for. So you got anything on those two, Rob?
You've hit exactly the same or the lack of things. US, I'd written not a lot. And Mexico got the same things down as you. So, yep. So let's move on to Brazil.
The only US thing worth noting is Martin Brundle's interview with Megan Thee Stallion on the grid walk, but don't watch it if you don't like to cringe. That's okay. So then Brazil. I got to say, this was another one of my favorite weekends of the year. It was unbelievable. Watch the race, but watch the sprint. And I don't want to call it a race, but watch the sprint ahead. Lewis took a new engine and then had some wing drama where he came in after the qualifying and Max touched his wing. And this is before the sprint, and the whole world went crazy. They measured Lewis's wing, and it was like half of a millifleck of a second meter. It was so small, but it was not in compliance. But Max had touched it. So Max got fined 50,000 euros, which is, I think, 450,000 Canadian dollars. And for touching someone else's car. And Seb had fun with this. Everyone had fun with this. But Lewis took a huge penalty, and he had to start from the back and sprint. And it was the craziest thing in the world because he comes through like a lunatic and he passes, 12 people or something nuts, and 13. And then he starts the race and he still has this new engine, and they introduce something, which if Mercedes were really ruthless, it's the engine undercut. And so they basically put a new nuclear power unit in the back of the car, and just, it was like the Jetson sound as it goes through the whole thing. And so that was so fun to watch, whether you're a Lewis fan or not. It was just fun to watch someone who had like a little bit of an advantage, more so than normal. I know all the Mercedes haters will say. And then as Lewis comes to challenge Max for the race lead, lap 48, turn 4, Max runs him off the road, and he didn't turn into the wrong way of the corner. So the FIA and the stewards didn't have anything to say, but what he did do was not turn far enough, and he missed the corner completely. And Max himself went all four wheels far off the track, and Lewis was so far off the track. He was actually, I think, over by people's houses. He was so far off. It was the craziest race. And the last thing I'd say is they were waiting for an investigation, and Charles Leclerc basically said, I'm watching, and if they don't give Max a penalty, then that's a new way to drive. He said this the next week when they were on to the next race. But to me, that is exactly what drivers are watching. And if the FIA, here's the second or third version of them really screwing it up, they allowed a new precedent to be set that says, as long as I don't hit you and I don't make the corner, I can do whatever I want. And they had more of them throughout. But to me, Brazil was probably the second weekend after Hungary where I just rewatched the whole thing. It was tremendous. I'm done. Sorry, that was long, Rob, but it was a big one for me, buddy. It was a big one, buddy.
It's okay, because I had to suppress all my childish. My mind's in the gutter when you started that whole thing about Max touched Lewis's wing, and then they had to measure the size of his wing and never touch another man's wing. I'm not even going to start going back down that one. No, but it wasn't a nuclear powered. It was Brazil does Mario Kart. Lewis was going along, picking up those little mushrooms and just whizzing past everyone. I've never seen anybody cut through. Now, we all know it's a sport of fine margins, right? We're sort of saying, oh, the guy, Mazepan at the back. I mean, over the course of a full lap, these guys right at the back are only like a second and a half of the guys at the front. It's kind of nothing, right? I mean,
yeah.
And this way that he just sliced through, and it was just that new engine, if that's what it made, the difference that you had just that extra few miles per hour down the straight, I guess acceleration out of corners. It was just nuts. It was nuts. I just, like I say, both the sprint race and the race itself. But yeah, we did Lewis to death last week, but you can't not mention that one without the way that he just so sliced through.
Yeah, so and then Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi. I really have nothing to add. I'll turn it to you. I just would say this. We learned in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi that the FIA emperor has no clothes. Just in Saudi Arabia, negotiating, I'll offer you starting here if you accept before the stewards get involved. Dude, turn off the FIA radio. It just shows that it's a big old mess. And then, of course, Abu Dhabi was an even bigger mess. I wasn't a real fan of Jeddah, the Saudi Arabia track. It was too fast, too long, and too tight. And I enjoy watching it. I worry for the drivers.
That was my note.
You can't have all three of those things. You either got to expand the track, you got to put more corners in to slow it down, or it just couldn't be that long to try to get around that thing perfectly. So to me, it was fun to watch. I was really worried for people. So those are my notes to close those three. Anything?
Yeah. I think me and you both said the same thing we were sort of comparing notes ahead of that weekend, just said, it's just got safety car written all over it, because you can't, Monaco's different. You're not going as flat out around Monaco. Yes, it's very, very tight. You've got unforgiving barriers, but you're not as fast. So your margin for error is probably still about the same, but it's just your brain can compute that, I think, a hell of a lot better. I'm not a Formula One driver. I'm just guessing here, but that track, so fast, so narrow, so just walls and concrete on either side of you. We both said, I think we were running a book on how many safety cars there would be. I think where is it? Did we get 3 restarts?
Oh, and they were all fast after the first 10 laps. Yeah.
2 red flags, 3 starts. We had the brake testing incident. We had, it was just crazy. There was just too much, debris.
And Michael Massey compounded it by acting like a clown. So to me,
well, it was like a game of poker. It was kind of, I'll see your giving the penalty back, and I'll raise you. It was just, what are you doing? I agree with you. I know they've been trying to. I think one of the things that they got really did really well this season was, like I said last week, was kind of allowing us kind of almost a fly on the wall, whether it be social media, whether it be more radio chat. And we've kind of felt like we've been on the inside of it a hell of a lot more. That one was for closed mics. So agreed. We didn't need to hear. I mean,
Don't tell us. We don't want to hear it. So, all right, moving on to the awards. What we want to do is highlight a few awards for the end of the year. And I'm going to kick us off here. And we don't know what each other has said. We're going to have to find a winner. I'm going to start us with funniest moment. Funniest moment is where I want to start. I want to go back to Silverstone. I want to go back to the crash at Copse Corner, and we already highlighted some of it, but I want to talk about what Toto did when he reached out to Michael Massey to say that Lewis was ahead going in, and Toto's team radio with the FIA was shared, and here it is.
Michael, I just sent you an email.
I just sent you an email. It's 2021. He's on the phone with the race director, and he wants to make sure that the race director is checking his Gmail.
Michael, I just sent you an email.
What? Are you? I almost said the word I can't. Are you kidding me? And so I thought it was hilarious when I was watching real time and Toto said, I just sent you an email. And I'm like, no, you didn't. When you have to tell someone you work with that I just sent you an email, check it. I mean, that is a real Karen move. And so to me, that was one of the funniest moments of the year to me, was when Toto, after a very serious crash, and a big crash for Max, 52 Gs, if I remember right, and it was nasty. I don't think it was particularly anyone's fault. Max cut in on Lewis. Lewis was going for the corner, yada, yada, yada. Point is, I just sent you an email. Rob, how about you? Funniest moment?
Well, mine's team radio as well, because I think, to be fair, this sport doesn't really give too many funny moments out on the tracks. It's not like they stop to tell a joke halfway around. So it was Belgium, and it was Lewis. They were talking about how long it had been since the restart. And he said, on one hand, I'm glad I went to the toilet. On the other hand, someone dropped a crazy bomb in there. Oh my gosh, that's going to haunt me for life. Best team radio I heard all year. We've all been there, right? I mean, if you've ever been to kind of like a gig and you've gone to one of the porta potties and you take your life into your hands when you go in there, I just figured that in F1 racing, it'd be like marble hallways and all pristine and the
drivers only.
Yeah. The fact that someone's dropped a log. I'd love to know who that was, actually, but all
right, you win. You win. I agree. I think that is the funniest moment. Funniest moment for sure. I remember that distinctly when they did that. So you're next. What award do you want to hit next?
I'm going to go for one that I think we might agree on, but I'm not sure. So this is the award for the most gut wrenching moment. This is the gut wrench award, and for me, it's Norris in the rain in Russia.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even have that on my list.
Oh, okay.
So for me, I started off with the obvious, Lewis and Abu Dhabi at the end of the year, when they made the decision to let 4 cars past and then stop the safety, whatever. We did that last week. I actually said Esteban in Brazil when he was going for podium and Valtteri came around the corner and slingshotted past and beat him by, it was a full car length. It wasn't like just a nose. But a podium for Alpine is a big deal. And so for Esteban, that was like a real, and he tweeted a lot about it on social media. He was constantly, it hurt. And then I said Max in Baku, when he's got the race won and he did nothing wrong and his Pirelli just went poof and he ends up in the wall. But
you got to pick one. What are you doing?
For me,
my 3 awards.
Yeah, why? You know, I mean, that's how I do it. I would say Esteban is my offer to fight your Lando, but I would give Lando the win. I'd give you the win here as well, because to me that was horrible, and his team radio just made me want to cry. And so I'd say Lando in Russia.
Did you just try to give me an offer? Are you now doing FIA radio here?
I can offer you second place if you agree to this right now. I'd agree.
No, I think your turn. Venus, I'm 2 for 2 now, so come on, you're up next.
Best teammate. I once again couldn't come up with one. I have Checo in Abu Dhabi, and not just during the race. He held Lewis up for a couple laps. But in qualifying, he gave the world's best tow as well to Max. So for me, it's either Checo in Abu Dhabi, or we already talked about it, Mr. Alonso in Hungary in the 6 or so laps where he held Lewis up and allowed Esteban to win. So those are my 2 nominations. Can you beat either of them?
No, because those are the exact same 2 I have written down. Now, we have to decide, which one did you go for in the end? Which one did you pick as your I got your 6 award?
I'd give it Fernando. I mean, you know, Fernando really didn't get anything out of it. He just, you know, he just did it because it was a team thing, and he had a bad reputation at some point in his career, and Esteban even addressed that awkwardly on the podium. So to me, I'd give it personally, I'd lean to Fernando in Hungary.
That's what I have circled on my piece of paper as well. So, okay. So
all right, we're making headway here. Yeah. Now all the casual fans, go back to these races and watch, so you see what we're talking about if you haven't already. It's amazing. Rob, you're up. What's next?
So now we're going to hit what we got here. We've got best moment and worst moment left. I'm going to go for best moment first then. So best moment, I had 2. I had the McLaren 1-2 back in Monza. But the one that just edged it for me that we've already talked about, my kind of best, most heartwarming moment was Vettel checking on Stroll.
On Lando or on Stroll?
Sorry, on Lando.
So I'm not making this up. These are my notes. I have 3, again, because I can't decide. We'll do better next year at the end. McLaren at Monza. So agreed. Just watching Danny, Rick, Lando, and Zach on the podium was awesome. So then I said Seb maturing into the elder statesman and championing causes, but especially what he did at Spa. So agreed. But I had a third. Ooh. And I'm going to just give it a shout out. It doesn't have to win. But Lando, he went on this morning in the UK. If you didn't think I watched enough random stuff on YouTube. And he went on about 2 months ago, right after Russia, right after the biggest, as we already said, gut wrench of the year. And he went on and talked about mental health and the importance of mental health and the McLaren partnership with Mind. And so my best moment, which I know will not win, but should be up there, is Lando bringing attention to anxiety and to mental health and the teammate and partnership that McLaren's had with Mind and other causes for the last 3 years has been awesome. And for a kid, he's a kid. He's 21-ish, give or take, who's grown up in F1. As the Brits would say, kudos, or as the Americans say, kudos to Lando. But I would put my money McLaren 1-2 Monza if we have to pick for that. You good with that?
Well, yeah, but I think you did a good job selling that third one, to be honest.
We'll go watch it. If no one's seen it, it's this morning, UK. I just rewatched the clip because I'd seen it months ago. So I'd seen it twice. But and then the last moment, we'll give it to McLaren with an honorable mention to Lando. The worst moment, I actually had, again, a couple, but I'm going to give you the answer. Here's the answer. All right. It's the FIA inconsistency and not setting precedents where they want to, and then setting accidental precedents where they don't. Brazil turned 4, calling Spa a race, allowing that farce of a restart at Abu Dhabi. Everything we've highlighted. So for me, the worst moment, quite honestly, was the FIA, and the new FIA president has to fix that. Michael Massey, in my mind, cannot be the race director going into next year. But that'd be my worst moment.
Well, yeah, I had 2 worst moments, and they were both the FIA making bad decisions. It was called in Belgium a race, and it was the ending in Abu Dhabi. And just for obvious reasons, being as we dedicated an entire episode to it last week, it was the decision in Abu Dhabi for me. It just, let's not go back over that again, because if you want to hear it, you can go back and you can pick up episode 1.
Exactly. All right, let's close this out. We're running long. Let's hit the top 3 and bottom 3. Rob, I'm going to let you introduce us and bring us through, but we want to talk about drivers of the year.
Yeah, so we're going to go with our bottom 3, right?
Sure.
I feel kind of bad doing this, so I'm just going to go through what I had, and then I'll just say why. I had on my third.
I feel kind of bad doing this. There's always a great intro to a section.
Yeah, well, it is, isn't it? Because these guys, the ones I'm going to pick, they're just in not very good cars, so that's already kind of like a bad. But I've gone for third worst Latifi, my second worst Schumacher. I just wanted him to be better. I just really wanted him to be better, but
not Mick.
I know, but he's just driving a car with 3 wheels, and they've all said that has a focus on next year's car. So hopefully there's going to be a lot more to come from that young man. But he was just terrible. He scored no points. I think Haas scored no points in the entire season as well.
That's correct.
And Mazepin was just.
Is he your worst?
Yeah, he was my worst. And I think there was an interview. I should have written down who had said it, but somebody had said about him that he just needs to go do something else. He's just not a Formula One racer.
So my worst was also Nikita. I called him Mazaspin. There is a website. How many spins did Mazepin do, or something like that? I got it wrong, but Mazepin for sure. And not just for the spins, but how many times in the first half of the year did he get blue flags and not get out of the way and impact the leaders coming through? So that was Nikita. It was hard for me to give the first driver of a team a bottom award. So I don't have Mick in here. I have Lance in here because he finished behind Seb. The team as a whole was just blah this year. He took out Charles in Hungary. It never felt when things went wrong it was ever his fault. He would just yell at Brad, his race engineer, "Brad, the car's not good, Brad." And it just got really annoying after a while. I'm like, dude, your car is terrible, but you're still behind your teammate who was good 15 years ago. And so I know his dad owns the team, and I'm sure they'll put out a Canadian hit on me after saying this. But to me, Lance was the second worst. And then the third worst, I struggled with this one. I'm going to give it to Yuki. And so here's the reason I give it to Yuki. He was so far off of Pierre's final points for the year. And I know he's a rookie. That's why it's hard for me to give it to him. But you can see what the car can do. And Pierre showed what the car can do, a lot on qualifying, not always in the race, but Yuki was just behind. And he finished fourth in the last race and still finished that far down. So I gave Yuki third.
Okay, so our top three. Now we've just got to be get this one out there. It's our top three, but with Max and Lewis removed. Okay, so
remove the two champion protagonists. We take them out. What are the next three? And so I'm going to start. Let's do our.
Go on then. Let's do our third before we move on to our second. Let's do both of our thirds.
Okay, my third, and I have two, so I have to pick one. It's either George Russell. I can say it easy. George Russell, who was Mr. Saturday, who scored points, who finished second or third in Spa, or Pierre, who in my mind was the new Mr. Saturday, who showed what the AlphaTauri could do over and over in qualifying. Huge points difference on their teammates on a relative basis. But Pierre was so far ahead of Yuki and Aston Martin and Alpine. I'll say Pierre Gasly, third best non-Max and Lewis driver for me this year.
Okay. Well, I have, because I've got a bit of a soft spot for him, especially after the rain in Russia, but I've got Norris standing on my third step. I just thought he had a really solid year. Showed flashes of what I think he's going to bring next year. So yeah, I've got Norris on the third step.
Good with me. I may have him somewhere else on my podium. On my second step up, I have
Smooth operator.
I have Carlos Sainz. He was fantastic. I think, and I joked last week, the number of points finishes he had to end the year was 7,500 in a row. I mean, seriously, was it 15 points finishes in a row, something? And he had some really bad Saturdays where it wasn't always his fault. In Saudi Arabia, the car was undrivable, and I'm doing air quotes for those on the podcast, and he still managed to make it happen. To me, he outpointed Charles Leclerc, who is the future of Ferrari with a 75-year contract they've never done before. It's a 5-year contract. They've never done that. Carlos came in, new car, new team, finished ahead of his teammate. I give Carlos my second step on the podium. He was fantastic in my mind.
So standing on my second step did you say you had Gasly on your third step?
Gasly third.
Yeah, he's standing on my second step.
Right.
So yeah, I just thought he had a phenomenal season, and he put that car, like you were still talking about the points differential. I think that was the reason why you gave one of your bottom drivers, because of the points differential to Gasly. Yeah, because Gasly was absolutely tearing it up in a car that shouldn't have been in some of the places he was putting it. So be interesting to see what he can bring. Well, again, we'll talk about it next week, but be interested to see what happens if we get a level playing field on cars, what Gasly can do. So Gasly's sitting on my second step. So who's popping the champagne cork on the top step for you, Brian?
Man, it's Lando Norris. You already talked about him. I don't have to recap it all. Just say the first half, he was the most consistent driver in the field in terms of points, who wasn't Max and Lewis. He was fantastic. It fell off a little for him in the second half, some bad luck. And especially after Russia, it felt, I don't know what happened, but to me, Lando was my non-Max, non-Lewis world champion driver of the year 2021. He came around that sort of first 2-year bend, lost his teammate, had a new teammate, but still showed out. He was fantastic. So to me, Lando was my champion driver. How about you?
Standing on the top of my podium is the guy that you just played the sound clip for, is Sainz.
Do we need the sound clip again?
I think we do.
Smooth operator.
He was great.
He was fantastic. And he just got, I've got a soft spot for Ferrari. I've always loved the Ferrari cars. I've always wanted to see them up at the front. They've just not been really super competitive for a while now, but he got that horse prancing again. Not up at the top end as much as probably he would want, but yeah, for me, he was outside of Max and Lewis, he was my number one.
So we agreed on the top three, just in different order, is what just happened.
Which is quite bizarre, which is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, so we disagreed on the bottom, we agreed on the top, but it just proves we're brilliant. And I would say, you mentioned the Ferrari. I got to say, I went into the year really hoping Charles would really do win some races, like Monza from a couple years ago. I really wanted a lot from him. And unfortunately, they just kept putting his slow button on.
Slow button on, slow button on.
And it hurt him. And I'm looking for more from him next year. And for everyone listening, before I let Rob close us out and say goodbye, I would just tell you that we're opening a store where we can sell merch. And there will be a red Ferrari type color shirt with the word slow button on in it, if only so I can buy it and wear it around proudly. But join us in doing so. So I loved it. It was a great year. I would say it was the best year I've ever seen personally. Go back and rewatch some of those races, Brazil, Hungary. There were a lot we listed. For new fans, check them out, get a feel. For the longstanding fans, we'd love to know on at F1 Dirty Side on Twitter what you agreed with, disagreed with. One of our friends says, I'm a big Danny Rick fan. And my wife wrote back, well, my husband has a picture of Danny Rick and Lewis drinking shoeies on a t-shirt. I said, I do. So, let us know about all this stuff. We want to hear from you. And we love doing this. So Rob, bring us home. Tell us what we'll be doing next week and what the people should expect.
Well, before I go on to what we're doing next week, it sounds like Santa's come early for you and already delivered you a little sound kit there with your little clips. It's fantastic. Maybe he'll also bring you next week a How to Do Better Impressions book so you can work on those impressions. But
one thing at a time.
Next week is going to be, we're going to start looking forward to 2022, start covering over the driver lineups, the teams, car regs, what's going to be different around the cars next year. And all the great things that we can be looking forward to. But given that this weekend, the big day is approaching, I think the only thing really left to say is to wish everybody out there a very Merry Christmas. Even you, Brian.
Well, thank you. Wouldn't it be called a Happy Christmas on the other side of the pond? I don't know. Isn't that how that works or no?
No, it's a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. If you say Happy Christmas and a Merry New Year, that just sounds all kinds of...
I didn't mean Merry New Year. But yes, we agree. Thank you all for listening. Have the best holidays. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Everyone be safe, be kind, be thoughtful, and be here next week. We'll talk to you soon.